I am most curious, straight first of all, about to hear a little bit about the kind of audio rehab, deep tech era, which I was watching but wasn't in the middle of. Like I was in the middle of the forward stuff and early dubstep with you. How did you first hear deep tech coming about? How did it grab your ear?
Um, it was kind of down to one guy. My old mate I've got called DJ Lombardo, who's from represents the Leicester crew.
Legend.
Yeah. So we our journeys have always been pretty similar. It's almost like they've been similar, but we haven't. It's not like we talked about it. It was like I was in the playing jungle back in the day. So was he. Then when I moved to garage, so did he. But if you imagine, we never spoke about that. That was just like I rang him up and I'm like, "So what you want at the minute?" He's like, "I'm doing garage. I'm playing garage." I'm like, "So am I." Like, so we just kind of we're almost like very like minded when it comes to the type of music we like. And I got to a stage where, if I'll be honest, I had no motivation to make tunes. I weren't really vibing. So I rang him up and I was just like, "What are you on at the minute?" Because currently I'm on it. I'm on nothing. So
What kind of times are we talking about? What sort of years are we talking about for this?
So this must have been 6 years ago, maybe 6, 7 years ago. No later than that, I don't think. Um, and he was like, "Oh, there's a new sound coming out of London at the minute, which is called Deep Tech." And I was like, "Well, is it tech house or is it deep house?" And he's like, "Well, it's kind of both, but it sounds raw and young, and it's like a new scene." Because I was saying, because at that time I was saying to, well, the house scene's kind of interesting because it's quite a closed door, that scene. If you don't know the right people or whatever, you're probably not getting in. So I was like, let me hear some of this music. Let me see what you're talking about. And he sent me some of the music, and one of the tracks that he sent me was, well, he sent me two actually to listen to. One was what's it called by Shaybrook called well, the other one was Carnell Beats anyway, so that was one of them. And he sent one by another one which is also on our audio rehab. And I was like, it almost sounds like garage but 4/4 and a bit techie. And he was like, "Yeah, you should try one. You should try one. See what you can do." So on that day when I spoke to him, I thought, well, I'll load up the sounds I would use to make like a garage track, and just see what happens. And what I ended up doing was a track called oh man, you've got me on the names here. Well, basically, it was my first release on Audio Rehab, and it was called. I'll have to get back to you on the name. The name will come to me anyway, but I can't remember it off the top of my head. It's been that long. And I did that track, and he says, "Right, you should send it to this guy called Mark Radford, because Mark Radford might play this tune. It's like it's quite a vibey, this tune." So I was like, "Okay, like I've never heard of him, but I'll send it to him." And I sent it to him, and he rang me, and he's like, "Yo, I like this tune. I want to sign it." Blah 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 blah. And I'm thinking, like, I don't know what deep tech is. I don't know if this fits. I don't really know much about it. But I'll go with the flow because I like the vibe, see what's happening. So I did that tune there, and that was just done one random Wednesday afternoon. Took me about 4 or 5 hours to do. Got a wicked response off that tune, which then I thought, I might as well make another one. So I made another one, and then realized I made another one, then another one, then another one. And then I was
Did you
just
think?
in.
Did you think at that point about using a different name for it? Because you used the RS4 stuff for audio rehab. Did that come later, or you were like, okay, I need a tweak?
So I had a 4/4 release before then, about 2, 3 years before then. It came out on vinyl with a DJ from Sheffield called DJ Veteran. And it was like DJ Veteran featuring RS4, right? And where the RS4 comes from, it's not a desire to be any affiliated with Audi in any way whatsoever. Is if it was just an abbreviation of RS. And then because it's 4/4 that I'm doing, it's just number 4, RS4. So it was like people's like, oh, do you love Audis or something? I'm like, not really. It was just an abbreviation I used years ago for 4/4 that I did. So I just kept it because I thought, it's 4/4, it's me, RS4. And
I
then
wonder whether it was like a phase, you like kind of like the fourth phase of. I mean, I hadn't really checked whether it was like Dark
you know,
One, DQ1, RSJ, and then it was like RS4. It was like I don't know.
yeah. So DQ1 was if you imagine I had Dark One anyway, right? So Dark One I had that as like it was a brand and it was a name that I used all the time. But then I wanted to do some much more simpler music. So I thought, well, an abbreviation or a short version of Dark One is just DQ1. So it just means music that, MCs would use more than, I'm not sitting there trying to make masterpiece. I'm sitting there trying to make music that an MC would be on anyway. So it was just an abbreviation of Dark One. So RS4 was pretty much born out the same logic where rather than RSJ, it's just a shorter version, RS and number 4 for 4/4. So that was all. It's not actually that creative when you think about it. But that's what I use, and then it kind of took off, the RS4 sound. I think it took off because the actual scene was new. It was quite a fresh and it was quite a green. So there was scope for for new players to come about and join in. And Mark was very supportive. Introduced me to his crew, the Audio Rehab guys. And it was like a little, I got into a sort of vibe of it, It was almost like I was probably doing about 1 or 2 tunes a week of that. So the production rate was much higher because I had less pressure. So if you think when I'm doing the normal stuff, like the 140 stuff, I've got pressure because I'm trying to make this tune better than the last tune, or I've got history with this genre, so I don't want to get it wrong. Where you imagine you're starting fresh in a brand new one, but it doesn't matter if you get it wrong because nobody knows what wrong is because it's new, it's green, it's fresh. So
what's funny about that is that's also how dubstep started, right? Lofa's
yeah,
saying, well, Lofa's saying, oh, drum basses and jungle's it's formulaed, we can do what we want, and then you're feeling that about dubstep afterwards.
Absolutely, it was the same thing. I remember when I was in the first time I went to London, I was in the Forward thing, and I was like, well, this music is so new, you can't really get it wrong. So yeah, it's got a bit of a format, it's got to be a certain tempo, and it's got our bass, but everything else is whatever you want it to be. And this just felt like that. So the deep tech era, or the deep tech sort of scene, felt like the original scene when I started, like for the Forward thing, because it was new. The door was open, it was welcoming to anyone who's got, if you could hold your own, you're invited, you're welcome. And it just felt the same. So I just rolled with it for a little bit. Ended up weirdly just playing all over the world. Played RS4 stuff, and I was like, I did not predict that. I just liked making this music. It just sounded young and it was fresh, it was green again. And it would just basically making me go back in studio. It was just something that it was like pressureless music that I was making. Yeah. Rather than when I was making my own stuff, it's pressure because I'm like, well, I need to get this hi-hat right, and that's got to sit put. And I'm like, and by the time I've analysed a track, I've probably spent all day on it, and I've got probably about the first 8 bars of the track, like where with the RS4 stuff, in about 3-4 hours, I could have got a tune done. And that's because I just found the vibe, put it together, add a little bit of mathematics to the arrangements, and that was it, done.
You say that it felt like there was no rules, but is it also true that, like, I really like deep tech, but it feels like it has a set of rules that are like, it's got to be roughly of a similar tempo and it's got to be roughly 4/4. Like, I don't hear a lot of people using breaks in it or half step or soca patterns. It's like, it's kick snare with like a big bass. Isn't that like, I'm trying to square off what you're saying about having no rules with, like, actually it's got some set of like percussive rules that are pretty fixed, right?
Yes. So it's got an arrangement. Yeah, yeah. So it's arranged. Easiest way to put it, it's arranged for DJs to play. Over the years, DJs get lazier and lazier. The bigger they are, the lazier they are. So if you've got tracks sort of complicated at the beginnings or complicated to mix, they're probably going to bow out at using it, right? Even if they really like the tune, it's probably not going to get no further than playing in the car or playing in the house. So if you imagine with the deep tech, the beats are really simple at the beginning because you want that to just be mixed, very simple. You don't want to give no DJs, none of these up and comings or whatever, no complications. You just want it to just be as smooth as learning to ride a bike. That's how the formula was. And it hasn't, you're right, it hasn't changed. No one's kind of gone outside of the box of that. But I guess I think it's just so if you keep the arrangement simple, you're more likely the club DJs are going to want to play it.
When I emailed you, I guess it was a while back about saying, hey, would you like to do a Keysound release? Or more like, it's pretty rude, I've never emailed you before about it. We should do this if you're interested. The connection I kind of heard in deep tech was the kind of Sheffield bleepy thing. And that's why I wondered why it might make a lot of sense is that I don't think those guys are making bleep or were making bleep in like 2014, but I could hear this other like pattern to that. Is that something you felt or could hear or?
Yeah, well, when you're starting again, or you're starting in something that's green, you can introduce what influenced you. So I've already done it once when I did it with like the dubstep scene where I wanted to introduce where I started from. So the bleeps and bass is what got me into music or got me into electronic music. So, and obviously when I was in the 90s, I didn't know how to make music. So at the point where I did know how to make music, then I can add it to the music that I make because that was my main influences. And then obviously I joined a new scene, which is loosely kind of, once you're in, you kind of, you can change it a bit. So the first sort of songs that I did were quite, what you would expect from like a bassy house track. But then as I went on and then I started to add more influences, like what would have pulled me in. So there might be ragga influences in some of the tracks, or there might have been bleeps in some of the tracks. But the type of music that would have influenced me back in the day came into the RS4 sound as well, because I was making probably maybe one or two tunes a week at that point there. I might have just heard something and thought, oh yeah, forgot I like that sound. Like, all right, let me try house music, a house rhythm, with this influence. So it was fun because it was almost like I could reinvent myself in a different genre. But to me, it's kind of all the same. It's still me. But it was just I could try again. Like I might have made a tune years and years ago. I didn't fully like it, or it didn't sound fully finished. Where then you can start again in a different genre, and now you can fix the issues you had with the track because your mixing is better, or your arrangement is better, or your mastering is better. So rather than keep remixing the same song every sort of 5 years or whatever, you just make a new song with the same influence but a different genre.
I think influences are a really curious thing, and it might be like hard to imagine if you're like 16 or 20 and you're just having that first rush of falling in love with some music for the first time. But like when there's been a bunch of them in your life, it's a strange sort of blessing and curse. Like, I know I can't throw my own influences away. I'll always be a jungle fan and be interested in funk and hip hop, and I'll always be a dubstep fan. I mean, even though I'm making stuff at the tempos we make it now, I'm always slightly thinking like, would Hatcher play it? Or that sort of thing, or does this have like would this have been good enough at Blue Note, which I went to but was never good, never made any music at those times. And everyone's got those influences, right? It's really, I think it's deep down really hard to ever get rid of them. And maybe we would never want to, because that's who we are musically.
Oh, yeah.
But you can't start in 2021, I think, if you've got 20, 30 years of music listening with and be honest about a completely clean slate. Like I think it's impossible. Like
I wouldn't be able to. Like, if I was sitting in studio today and I thought, I start a new house tune and I'm listening to it and I'm thinking, well, it sounds like that, like the old house tunes that I would listen to years ago. But I'm not trying to do that. It was just that's just what came. You know, like that's the sort of thing. Um, Once you've listened to music as much as we have, it's almost impossible for you to not be influenced when you're in studio. The only thing I used to do when I made music full time was try to be influenced by brand new sounds. So I would listen to music I've never heard before, or genres of music I've never heard before, just to get almost a different dimension or a different vibe. Because what I found, especially in the dubstep scene, a lot of the guys in the dubstep scene only listen to dubstep, so they was being influenced by dubstep, which then it almost made a lot of the songs sound exactly the same. So I get where it comes to from a DJ perspective. That's wicked because it means you can do very, very clean mixes because that track sounds pretty similar to this track. So I understand why you would do that, but then it just makes everything sound the same, and then you almost can't. You don't know, is this a new tune? Is this an old tune? I don't know. I can't tell.
I think there was a similar thing with all the stuff that came after Ed Rush and Optical's Wormhole in drum and bass. Like
Yeah.
there was a whole generation that only listened to that album and that style of quite like dark grey, stripped back like tech step, and then just and then it just the scene just comes in on itself.
Yeah, yeah.
So maybe that's like your influences, but you can't escape your influences, but your influences are very narrow.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So every so often, I would want to listen to something else or something different, and I put an album on that I've never heard of, and just put it on and just listen to it and think, why do I like this? What is it about this that I like? And then I would think, now I've got this, now I've heard this album and it's fresh in my mind. Just sit in studio and just make some music, right? Now, if you do that, yeah, you're probably going to pull in some subliminal thing that you've heard in this album, but you're still going to work to your formats of the genre you're in, right? So it's still gonna work, or should still work if you do it that way.
And tell me about a little bit more about the house track you're making, or some of the stuff that you're like excited by at the moment. What have you heard recently, or styles, or made recently that's like got you back in the studio?
Do you know? Weirdly, I think because of lockdown, I've been watching the movies. So what I used to like doing is sampling films, and sounds. So the last EP I put out as Oris J, so like 140s. Most of that track, I think all three of those tracks are just from movies. Like the sounds, or they've got sounds in, or two of them are from movies, yeah, because one's from like Godzilla, which is I don't know why I used Godzilla, but it worked. And then the other one was from the movie Black Panther, and I think that's how I used to like to do things. I'd hear a clip of a film and think, how can I put that in a track? Like how it used to be like the Jungle days. You'd hear things from old-fashioned like movies or reggae sound system tapes where they'd have robbed some vocals off the back of there. Like that was how I used to like to make music, is just find some weird thing that somebody said in a film and find a way to put it in a song, in a track. So I did that for a bit. Last couple of tracks that I did is just sort of find influences from movies, or like just sounds, or just listening to things like that. So that last EP I did was literally just from watching a couple of films where I did it. The house stuff is harder to do that with, because it's not really a genre where they throw in bits from films really, or bits from reggae sound systems. So it's a bit more difficult because you've got to find, say, maybe a vocal they might recognize, or a vocal that sounds similar to something they might recognize, or something that's a little bit catchy. So your thought process is a little bit different when you're making house than it would be if I was doing 140. At 140, I literally could have throw anything in and try to make it into a track. where when I'm doing like the 123 BPMs or lower, I've got to think um, this is not a genre that is heavily influenced by reggae or heavily influenced by movies or
It could
gangster movies.
be. It could be. Surely you
Yeah.
can do whatever you want.
If you imagine if you heard like a Scarface reference in like a dubstep track, you'd go, yeah, all right, yeah, I could understand why that's in there. But if you heard like a Scarface reference in like a house track, you almost be like, not sure this works in this. So because you're almost expecting it to have a female or male vocalist in a house track. You're not really expecting to hear
Right.
Scarface. Do you know what I mean? So you're right. You could probably put it in. You could try it, but what you're doing is you're almost how can I put it? You're going a little bit off piste, so you're taking a bigger risk that that track will work. So and you still got to spend the same amount of time with a track that you might not work as you would that a track that you know will just fit anyway.
It does seem like a whole generation after lockdown discovered Double 99 Rip Groove for the first time. And
yeah,
that's a pretty raggery house track. I mean, I know it's garage, but you know, like
yeah. But again, that would have been somebody like, I don't know, it'd have been some massive DJ somewheres for, do you know what, I'm gonna play this tune for you know, for fun, see what happens. Now, the minute they would have done that, all the kids would have been like, well, what tune's this? They'd have got the Shazams out. It's very easy to Shazam a tune like that. And then they'll play it as well because the big DJ they've just heard's played it, so it must be a big tune. They don't know its history, they don't know its heritage, they don't care about that. They just care that it's fun and it's loud and it's got a big bass line and their favorite DJ played it on some mix. So, but you're right. So but that's, how can I put it? That would be like an anomaly, or should I say that's not an invention. That's something they've just pulled from old school and brought it new school for fun for a minute. So I think if somebody was like, I'm going to make a set of tunes like Rip Groove with the same style, I think it'd be fun for a minute. But then the people be like, I want to go back to some girl or some boy singing about love.
I'd be there. I mean, though, to be honest, that tune is difficult to top. It's pretty special. I mean,
Yeah,
it's been pretty special for quite a long time, like on a whole bunch of levels. But I don't think you can make a whole set that's that hype because it's kind of the peak of that whole thing, isn't it? It's like literally number one record, wasn't it? So,
yeah, really.
what about? Did you ever connect with Bassline? Was that your thing?
Um, not really. Short. I'll give you a little short story one. So when I started playing UK garage, but when it was 4/4, so I was playing 4/4, and to me, I thought this was universal music. I'm like, how can not everybody like this? It's got 4/4, which everybody knows. It's got bass, which everybody knows. Yeah, it's got a couple of little bits and bobs of like ragga samples in there, but so what? It works. So to me, I thought this was universal. So I was coming to London. I was buying all these UK garage tracks, and we had a club in Sheffield called Niche. You've probably heard of it because everyone's heard of Niche. And I got booked to play at Niche, and I thought, oh, wicked! So I can introduce Sheffield to, well, really bassline, because that's kind of what it was, but it was just called 4/4 Garage at the time. And I played a set there, and the crowd liked it. And at the end of the finished my set, the promoter came to me and he went, I don't really know what that was that you played, that jungle music, but you can't play here again. So I was like, right, so I got hired and fired in an hour. That's the first.
Did you play jungle or garage?
No, it was garage, but to them, it was so different, right? To them, it felt like it was jungle music. That's what they defined it as, just because it had the odd man talking about, gunshot, like how they are in most styles. So to them, the music was so different to what they was used to in that club They didn't want it in there anymore. Now, as it turns out, it basically then became Baseline anyway, right? So
Yeah, but people that don't know, like literally Baseline was like, as far as I understand it, was like Sheffield and Leeds taking really heavy 4/4 garage stuff and just keeping it going in their own way, like making their own stuff. Like
I just did it too early in there. That's all it was. So I mean, I could have persevered and I could have changed the style and made it a little bit more, user friendly for a few weeks, and then threw in the odd track. But I didn't want to do that. I was like, I've got a bag of these brand new music I've just bought from London. I've gone on a train, bought all this music, come all the way up here to try and introduce it. They weren't ready. So I thought, I'm not taming it down for them. I'll just stay playing in London. That was it. So whilst I was down south, that's when Baseline became bigger up north. So, but there's some DJs up here that I proper love up here. Like you got DJ Q up here, you got Fredo up here, Skills. Like, so these are DJs when I can sit and listen to them all day playing the Baseline stuff. But when you hear it, you can see it was influenced from the old school, like garagey stuff.
speed garage, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's just that at the time when I was playing it, it was too new for that. For easy way to put it, too new for Sheffield.
I saw you played recently in Sheffield. What was that like?
Yeah, that was all right. It was my first gig since lockdown. So weirdly, I was kind of nervous. I was like, how can I be nervous when I've been DJing since I was 14? But I was kind of nervous in there. And then, it was like my headphones didn't work. And I'm like, is it me or is it the headphones? I can't tell because I had headphones on for like 2 years. But the vibe was all right. People was in there who was loving it. It was more me. It was just me. It was just a little bit like, this is a strange feeling to have that I've been in this industry since I was 14 years old, and I'm now nervous to be behind a pair of decks. I was like, this is not me. But I got over myself after about 10 minutes, so I was all right.
I mean, I don't want to be flattering, but you always seem like a really natural DJ. So it is kind of funny to hear you say like,
But that was the same thing for me. I'm going to the club. I must have checked my music about 20 times on that day just to make sure everything. And then I'm like, it was like the weirdest experience. I got behind these decks. I'm like, what am I supposed to do with these? What am I supposed to do with these? I'm like, they're just decks. And if you get for a minute, I was like, because all the way through lockdown, I didn't do. I've got some CDJs here, but I haven't touched them. So this was literally the first time I'd been in a club situation since before lockdown. Now, the only saving grace is just before I did the gig, I actually did a radio spot before it. So that gave me sort of like the courage to remember where things are and what I'm doing. But I played a jungle set, so it was a little bit different. So it was easier because I had an MC. So I was like, well, no one's going to notice if I make a few mistakes because the MC will cover that up. But at the club, obviously, there's no MC. So that's just me. So there was a little bit more pressure to get it right because there was no one to cover me up. It was just me.
I found it weird that you're weirded out by the decks. I think I'd be weirded out by the number of people. Because we just, for 2 years, we didn't.
Well, that the walking in is where I got that first, right? So as I pulled up and I'm like, wow, there's a lot of people outside here. So that's when I got that sort of wave of there's a lot of people in this place here. And then you start thinking about COVID, but like I tell you, once you're in the club and you're behind them decks, you're not thinking like that anymore. It was just more when I looked at these CDJs, I'm like, I don't even really know what I'm doing with these things here. But no doubt I'll work it out. So put the first song on, it worked. I was like, right, I'm in. It worked. I didn't need to get too technical. Didn't need to find the engineer. Just press play and it worked. So then I was like, wicked. So what I need to do is find out how to get the other one to work, and we're good.
Yeah, when Rinse Studios shut, me and Dusk got Pioneer DDJ 1000, which is like CDJs with minus the CD bit, and I'm glad we did because it's a really beautiful bit of kit and it allowed us to keep the radio show going during lockdown. And you have to get used to each piece of kit, but it's really It's really well made. But I wanted to ask you about lockdown. Did you find at all, or how did you find like your behavior with music, your approach to music, when suddenly we had all our community and our connections taken away, right? You couldn't share it with a lot of other people or be in a loud sound system, or there was no clubs to play the tunes at. Like, and for me at least, there were periods of feeling like, is this the end of the world? This feels bad. Like a lot of people are dying. I can't go out. We're asked to stay in our houses. Did you find like your approach to music like change at all, or your emotions around music change at all?
Yeah, I had a lot of mixed feelings. I'll be honest with you, I didn't like lockdown at all. It wasn't. I know, like I know a lot of people was like, "Oh, wicked! I could play Xbox 24/7 or whatever," but I'm not built like that, so I didn't really like it. And then my first thought was, right, okay, so all I'm gonna do now is just make music all day. That was my first thought. Um, and then I had this weird sort of reality of, well, I don't make songs, I make club tracks. My tracks don't sound great if you're just playing them, you know, on a radio sort of thing. Like they're built for a club, and there is no clubs. So what am I building this music for if there's nowhere to play it? So then I was sitting there and I was like, well, do I start making, the arrangements different so they work as a radio track, or they would work if you just went onto Spotify or whatever. But then I was then saying, well, that's not me. So I'd be changing who I am as a producer for the sake of lockdown. And I didn't really want to do that because it took me too long to get to the point where I'm comfortable with the music I make to then completely change. And like I was getting people saying to me, "Oh yeah, you should just make some songs, like like some 3-minute things, with basically no intro and." And I was like, I could. And then I started thinking, well, do I do a club version and then do like a radio version? But then my mind was still saying to me, but there is no clubs. So why are you making a club version if there is no clubs? And without a club version, I then couldn't make the radio version. So I was in this weird catch-22 where I couldn't, I didn't really see why I was making music. So I didn't really make much through lockdown. I think in the 18 months, I probably did one EP in that length of time. Like in reality, that length of time you got off work or whatever, I should have been able to make 2 albums out of that, 3 albums out of that, but I did. I made 3 songs in the whole of lockdown, or 3 tracks in the whole of lockdown. That was it.
And I think you're pretty, as a pattern many of us felt, and I hear from many other people. So yeah, I think it's a really unusual experiment. And like well, experiment's not the right word for it, but like it sort of is been a bit of an experiment. And I think club
Yeah.
music had it worst because it turns out, I think if you were to invent a formula for like spreading COVID, it would probably look like a club. Get a bunch of people together who are like yelling and breathing, and lower the ceiling and make it hot, and then don't have any ventilation. Like that's what my favorite clubs feel like. Like
Yeah.
Forward and like Blue Note and all DMZ and all those ones. That's exactly what it is. But like, yeah. So if your thing was playing classical music in a big field, then maybe you were like okay, or singing outside with your friends doing choral music or something. But for club music, we were like hit so hard with that. But I suppose the thing that's interesting for me is the difference between percussive music and then music for a club. They're kind of the same, but like for me, I didn't feel like I stopped loving dance music just because clubs were shut. But I certainly made less music than I thought I would as well. um,
I, I'd started listening to almost like old school, like not even old school, some of it were new. Like people like Mighty Crown, the sound system, reggae sound system, and just listening to stuff like that and hoping one of them would make me go, actually, you know what, I'm gonna make a tune off this. All I just kept telling myself is, when this tune is finished, what are you actually gonna do with it? Because there's nowhere to play it. And it's built to be on a sound system, and there's no sound system. So on my little Rocket speakers, I'm not writing albums just to play on them. So I would just literally, it's almost like I feel like I missed an opportunity to write another album, sort of thing, which I kicked myself for in a way. But I wouldn't want to do a half-hearted album. I wasn't in the mood or the mindset to make music. I would literally be, if I did it, I would have doing it, making music by numbers. That was it. It'd have been just math, just math.
It sounds like it took away the why for you, the why you do it.
Exactly what it did. Yeah, yeah. If you think the arrangement, the format, the sounds, everything you would need to make music, I had. In the process of lockdown, I'd got a new computer, brand new sounds. Like I literally made it so I was ready to go for, ready to go to write as much music as physically possible, and then did 3 tracks in 18 months. So, and even those, I was like, I'm gonna shorten the intros to like 30 seconds, because I don't know if people are playing 1-minute intros anymore, sort of thing. So even that, I didn't like how they started, but I thought 30 seconds means I've still kind of got an intro, so I'm all right with that. But again, these are not things I should have been thinking about. Normally, I just sit in studio and I just jam. Where now I'm sitting in studio, I'm like, oh, I've got to think about this, I've got to think about that. What if it's? I'm like, and that took away creativity, because I'm thinking about too many other like outside influences rather than just sitting in there making music.
Yeah, I think the bit that kills me is like when a mix down's not working. that can be like really like a bit of a head fuck. But yeah, it sounds like it wasn't a creative period, and I really think I hear it all over the place. People saying the same things, like should have been amazing, but it really affected everyone how they felt about music.
Yeah, it comes down to, in a way, it's mental health, innit? Because when you've got too many things telling you can't do something, but really it's just your mind stopping you from doing it. I could have wrote an album, but I just literally tried. I sat down in the studio, I'm sitting there, I've got everything turned on, I'm good to go. Cup of tea on the side there, I've got peace all day. I turn it on, I'll probably be in there 20 minutes to turn it off. It's literally just turn it off, because I'm like, I don't really know what I'm doing. It's almost like I felt like, I don't know, it's like, imagine you're a pro footballer, but there's no football pitch or no football. So you've got nowhere to play. So as much as you want to and your mind's ready to do it, if you've got no football pitch, what are you going to do?
I was changing tracks a little. Are there any kind of memories of the early Forward stuff that's worth sharing? Like, what does it, for people that didn't go to the really early Forward, like like Velvet Rooms? Like, I think I was there for that photo shoot, like the Faith magazine photo shoot with you're in that, right? And Zinc, and it's on the roof.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah,
those are like 2001, 2000. Those are really early times, right? What do you, for folks that weren't part of that or didn't get a chance to see it, do you have any good memories of that, or describe what it felt like?
It was an awesome feeling, to be part of something new. But some of the people that was in that scene was already established, producers. So it was almost like I had to try harder to be better, because this is not a set of people who have just started making music yesterday. These are people who know what they're doing. And if you imagine, I didn't really know what I was doing. So, but in a way, I was happy to be the underdog, or happy to be at the bottom, because I know that means I've got to work up. So so like when I did Bigging Up the Massive, again, I was on a little music technology course in Sheffield. Me and a couple of the other guys, students, were just round at my house one night. We was, I had a few drinks, and I put the format together just based on I had a clip, had a bit of a clip from a promotion that a friend of mine did.
No, I have to say, no one thought you were like making it up for an amateur, like when you were making music. If you were trying really hard at that at any point to step up levels, it worked. Because like I can't ever remember thinking, oh, O'Shea doesn't know what he's doing, like even production wise. And I no, and I think what's in what you're saying, which maybe is worth teasing out, is like, is it true that that early era of producers around what became dubstep, but certainly the early forward stuff, was pretty competitive?
Yeah, well, if you think a lot of the guys already knew how to make music, so they was already very, 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 very good at producing. The the key is who was gonna um, uh, like, if you imagine in a new genre, a new era, is whose sound is the one that's gonna people are gonna follow. So if you imagine you had the LB sound, you had the Benny Hill sound. Um, they sounded similar but different.
Yeah.
You had Zed Bias's sound. He was a little bit more musical. Even at that time, you had a bit of Wookie as well, doing some of the harder stuff. Then you had Zinc, doing like the more breakier stuff. So it's like everybody was holding their own, but still you almost wanted to, how can I put it? You wanted to be the one. You almost wanted to. It was a bit competitive because you're almost thinking, well, I've heard that tune. That tune's going off. I need to make a tune what sounds like me, but will also go off in a club as well. So yeah,
I
it was
I
a little.
I think there could have been scenes. There are scenes where people are focused on like having a few beers and mucking around and having a party. And I think those scenes, like, there's loads of them. But what you're so I witnessed this like kind of arms race with like producers, and I think like, totally, I think it was competitive in a good way. Um, and I can see why. Like, I definitely like remember things like, well, people saying, well, I heard that big tune last time there was forward, so I got to come back with something that's like even bigger, and that maybe just that competitiveness pushed it forward.
Yeah,
No
but
pun intended.
yeah, no, yeah, but in a way, that's. I wish there was still a little bit of that now, because you imagine you got booked for forward. You can't go to a record shop and just buy whatever the latest releases were and play it forward. That doesn't work. So the minute you got that call from Sarah, I want to put you on this gig, your whole life from there is changed, because what you then got to do is think, I've got to now make as many dubs as possible or get tunes from people I know this only exists in this space
Yeah.
to be able to play a set. So you'd go in studio and think, I saw what happened in the last forward. I can't be under that. I can be on par with it. I'm not trying to be better than it, but I can't be under it. That's as simple as that. So if you think your music production went up because it had to, but you had a baseline, so you knew where you were setting your bar. So imagine now there's no bar to set. Like, I could go in, I could make any music, or like, there's enough. I'm not competing against anything. I'm not comparing it to anything. Where back in the forward eras, you saw what Hatcher did in there, or you saw what Jada Flex did in there, and you're next. So what are you gonna do? Because
The funny detail you got to add again for folks who weren't there is you're saying Sarah rings you books and you think, oh, like, this is basically my Olympics, or this is my marathon. Like, I've got to come and put time in the studio, come with an amazing set, and you can't buy it in a shop. But we've got to remember that a lot of those forwards were pretty empty. Yeah, the way you describe that story, if you don't add this detail in, you think like you're Andy C going to AWOL and like it's like rammed, right? It's like the mindset. I mean, I'm totally, I was there. I know, I completely agree. But often it was like 40 people, right, or less.
yeah,
10
but
or 50. But like, it wasn't like some massive metalheads rave, or some massive jungle roast thing or something where there was like loads of people. It was just it was, maybe that made it worse because, you know.
Yeah, when you think of it though, there would be 10 or 20 or 30 people in there. What almost like would be train spotting your tracks. So they would think, like for instance, I might have gone there and I'd have brought out a new version of As We Enter or something like that. Where if I did a VIP mix of a house track, now I don't think no one would notice it was a VIP track, to be honest. But back then, people would notice, right? They would notice that the track is different. You know, they'd be like I remember going to Forward and I can't remember what it was I did, but it was a track and I had three guys just staring at the dub, just going round and round and round. And they was telling me what this track is. Now, if you think of, I've just made this, so it's not like internet even existed where they could have really, but the reason they knew what it was is because they knew it was a VIP of something else. But there was like, so they almost even got the timeline right of when I must have made it based on when that came out and now I'm playing it. So these are people that studied the sound or studied it. So there might have been 40 people in there, but 20 of them were like scientists when it came to what new music is. So it was still fun to do because it was like proper appreciation, because you've just been in studio all day just to make a version of a track you've already done just to play it forward. So you want somebody to notice. That was
And
the play noticed.
And I've got to add though, like this sounds like it could also be really dry or really boring, but the sound systems were so physical that they were fun in a way that like yeah, fun. Like it was exciting, almost like flight or fight, like your chest is coming in and you're like, whoa, my head's exploding because what's this new tune? The way you're describing it, maybe if you hadn't been there, you could think, oh, that just sounds like a bunch of people like compare like in a very dry way. But no, it was like this excitement of like
Oh,
the rush of the new and this competition.
absolutely. Yeah, yeah. One, one of my one of my favorite nights there, I think I drove from London to just play it forward, and I was driving straight back, and I was doing a back to back with Hatcher, and I didn't know Hatcher that well back then. I wish I did, because he basically we'll play three tunes each. So I'm like, oh yeah, wicked. I've got loads of free. I think I only played three tunes because what he was doing is every tune he played, rewound it. And then he played it again and then rewound it. So one tune would probably get 4 or 5 rewinds, right? And then he'd play another tune and rewind it. And then he'd play a VIP of that tune and then rewind it, right? So if you imagine his free tunes was actually more like a journey into these free tunes. So I'm sitting there going, so when am I going to play mine? Because I was trying to just get mine in and out to get him back on so we can juggle. Nah, he weren't juggling. He was literally going rewind, rewind, rewind. And the crowd were loving it. So because he was on a flow, I couldn't say anything. And I was like, yeah, man, I've drove from Sheffield to London and I played 3 tunes and drove back. But there was vibes. It was vibes. And that was the bit where I was like, if I'm trying to explain this to someone who lives up north, they'd be say, are you crazy? Like, you drove to London for 3 tunes. I'm like, but if you was there, you would understand that it was still beneficial. It was still awesome to see and to watch.
History's on your side. History was made there. Like we we couldn't have been sure that that scene was going to go anywhere, and clubs come and go, nights come and go. But it turns out that what happened there made history in loads of different ways. So maybe it was worth driving. Now I feel like Dusk would kill me if I don't like tell you this story, and I don't know if I don't know if it was something we ever told you about, but there was one time you just reminded me of this. Maybe Dusk could tell it better than me, but there was one time we were at the back of Plastic People, and it was one of the few times that Normski turned up. Like, and I don't know how well known Normski is now, but obviously he was the face of Dance Energy on Channel 4 and like, you know, the rave generation, right? He was pretty famous, much more famous than anyone in that club, mostly, but a big personality. And anyway, so he comes running off the dance floor and you've just played your set. And I don't know how this conversation went, but like he was kind of talking to everyone and no one was like, yeah, yeah, yeah. And the bit that just stuck in me and Dusk's head was he goes, I've got all those tunes. Yeah, I've got all those tunes. And then he kind of walks up the stairs and leaves. And we're like, Oris has just played like an upfront selection of his own dub plates that nobody in the world has. Like, there's just no way, Normski, you have these tunes. That's the point of this club. We just laughing, Fraser going, yeah.
That's that bit, right? Because he came to me and he said to me, "You went, all them tunes you've got there, I've already got them." And I was like, and I went, right, okay. I went, because one of the last one that I played there, it's not even finished. I literally had to run out of the house, and because we had a guy up here called who used to cut dubs in Sheffield, and I literally got him the last thing before I set off. I said, "Can you? I know I'm getting you out of your bed or whatever. Can you cut this for me right now? Because I've got to play it tonight." And I played it, and it wasn't finished at the end. But I thought, you know what, 4 minutes is enough. Normski's telling me he's already got that. He's had that for a while, that tune. And I'm like, like this, like the acetate still smells of acetate because I've literally just cut this right now. But he was excited, you know, he was jumping around and he was getting a vibe. He was telling lots of people that all these tunes he's got them all already.
I mean, it's kind of weird because he didn't come many times, and like, I don't remember him being part of the scene very. And there were a bunch of people that did come, like, you know, Miss Dynamite came a bunch of times, loads of times, and obviously Wiley and Skepta were there a whole bunch of times too, and Genius and Slimzy all were a huge part of it. But Normski, I only remember him coming a couple of times, and it's just too weird to, like, maybe he didn't even know what a weird thing what that was to say. Like, there's a whole scene about dub plates, and he's telling you've got dub plates, and it's like they're yours, and he's got them. It's like, oh.
he was convinced, and it wasn't for me to unconvince him that he didn't have any of the tunes that I played. Like, he was excited, and I didn't want to take someone's excitement away from me. He was buzzing. He was like, "Yeah, I've got all them, got them all." I was like, right, okay, because I've literally just got this, you know. I was like, yeah, I know, but I've already got that.
I reckon it's a skill, and I don't know, I'm sure I've got it in, like, just looking like, I'm really just. I wish I could do it more. Like, if someone says that, you're like, no, but without even saying the word no, just like.
Yeah, he was too excited, you know. It was like it wasn't for me to take that excitement away, but it was that. I'm surprised you remember that, because I remember saying the exact same thing as Normski has just told me he's got every one of these in for ages. And I've literally, this one here is so fresh. I cut it and came straight to London. I didn't even, so, you know, like, I didn't even have played because I didn't even test it before I set off. I went, the minute it was cut, I was gone.
And yeah, well, there were a bunch of great moments before, but probably a few was as funny as that one. I wonder what, like, whether there's enough water under the bridge where we can talk about the whole break step thing, because again, like, it's one of those funny things that's like, at the time was really political, and actually, like, even though that we'd met each other through, like, Big Up the Massive and some of that stuff in the really early Velvet, by the time I got to the Four Breaks thing and so, or break step thing, I remember it being quite, like, we were on the other side, different sides of the fence a little bit. I was unpopular for expressing views about that, and it's, how do you look back on that, like, on that era? Sorry, I'll just say, just to clarify for other people see it, you know, obviously, you know this, like, there were a bunch of styles that came out of Forward, loads of things, broken beat, grime was played there, though obviously grime was invented somewhere else. Like, you know, there was breakier sides of dubstep, there was dubstep itself, garage, all those things, and then eventually there was a brief period where there was quite a polarized camp between the people playing stuff that was breakier and then folks who were playing stuff that had less, like, no breaks in it, and that second bit became probably more what's recognized as dubstep now. So anyway, what do you remember of that stuff? Like, how, you know, how do you reflect on that era?
It was a strange thing, right? Because I kind of, all I kind of did was, I used to like break beats because I come from jungle anyway. So putting the odd break here and there in garage, and it wasn't a scene. It wasn't me trying to be in a scene or me trying to do anything else. It's just, I've got I was still using an Akai sampler. I've got an Akai sampler filled with break beats. So I'm not going to dismiss them just because it's not in the scene that I'm in, right? So I'd start throwing the odd one in here and there. Now, I remember doing a track. Well, I've done a couple of tracks before. So Confused, which was basically the first one on Texture, was a breakbeat. I took that from Erykah Badu, and the B side is the exact same breakbeat. I just played it differently. So if you think of putting a break in music wasn't alien to me, it was just what I did. And then I did Said the Spider, which is just a break again. And all I did is I just kept the format of two-step, but used a breakbeat to do it, and had like a weird didgeridoo bass in there. Now I remember the first time I sent that to Sarah, and I only did it because I wanted to dub What No One Ain't Got for Forward as well, that track, Said the Spider. So I played it to her and she was like, I don't know what this is, but I'm not sure this is going to work out. So I was like, okay. Because it's literally, I just did it just to play for me anyway, so it doesn't really matter. I'm just going to just play it at forward. And she went, yeah, cool, no problem. And that was kind of the story, was it. That was done. And then about 3-4 hours later, she rang me back and she went, that tune there, you haven't scrapped it, have you? I was like, no, I'm not, you've made me think I shouldn't play it, but I haven't scrapped it. She went, keep the tune. She goes, keep the tune. I've just played it to a few people and they're telling me that they want it. So I was like, all right, cool. So now that tune, I don't know what happened there, but the breaks, there was a break scene running sort of adjacent to the garage scene. I was unaware of this at the time. But after Said the Spider, what started to happen is people I've never heard of, DJs I've never heard of, who have got kind of status in their world, but I don't know what their world is, are saying, we need that tune. So I'm kind of like, okay, but what do you do? And they're like, we do breaks and like break step stuff. I was like, what's that? And I started to listen to the stuff and I was like, oh, okay, I get it. But some of the break beat, what they was doing was very much almost like slowed down drum and bass. That's what that was like. I was like, so I didn't fit there. So then I became in this like gray area, because if you imagine the break scene was a different scene to the dark garage scene, but they were playing my tracks in that scene. So I was in this weird gray area. So I think that's where people say, well, what you do is kind of like break step, because it doesn't sound like the dark garage stuff, but it's not breaks. But you are using.
Confused is a good tune for that, because I remember it being quite like funky and like the hits were on there. But I think there was an era of I mean, the break thing is the break thing, right? That was always a big scene anyway. But then there's also that era of that history where we started, you know, if you think about, it was Plastic People era, but then folks started, like, I guess maybe Search and Destroy is a good example of that, sort of made things within the camp of like people coming forward, but making it harder and breakier and a bit more distorted. Whereas Confused is super light and funky and you can still hear the hits. And it felt like it was like the energy levels and the production levels were heading towards basically where the harder end of dubstep ended up. But certainly it was quite different to what was going on with folks, I suppose, Digital Mystics and those sorts of things, like within that scene. And I just remember that era getting quite political and people getting quite angry at a bunch of the sides, and angry at me for saying, well, I think this is dubstep and I think this is a breakier thing. I mean, it's just anyway. I mean, it doesn't matter either way, but I just remember it being a bit difficult to talk about for a while because people were
oh yeah, I remember, like, because I was kind of getting booked for breaks clubs, and it was the weirdest situation being in a club. I didn't know anyone. It was like the demographic was completely different. It just felt odd being there. And then it was almost like, as some of the garage people say, well, why are you doing them clubs? I'm like, to me, I'm just playing my music in there, sort of thing. But I could see where the divide was, because they had a different principle. It was different discipline. Like the guys who were at the top of the break scene wanted to keep it clean, keep it breaks. They didn't really want hybrid music. That's not their thing. But then on the flip side, they'd play Zinc tunes. They'd play my tunes, but they didn't really want to go beyond that. So it was almost like we need the hype of this other genre. We just don't want that genre. So I could see where there was a bit of a divide back in the day because I felt it myself. Where it was like I met some good people in the break scene. I'm not gonna lie, but I also got a lot of pushback as well. I didn't fit. Like the easiest way to put it is there was like me and another DJ called Teo. That was the only version of kind of color in that scene.
Did you feel
So
that explicitly that it was about color as much as the music you were making?
I wouldn't have said it was that, but like I imagine I went into a club. The first time I went to a breaks club, I had my Averex on. So and I walked in, and as I walked in, the first thing a girl said to me is, "Are you so solid?" And I was like, "So solid, like like it's not like a one person thing. There's like a few of them, right?" And I laughed because I thought, you know what, she's drunk. And then I got to the DJ box, and another guy says to me, "Are you so solid?" And I was like, "So this is a thing around here. Like, so if you're black and you've got an Averex, you've got to be so solid." Like now, if you imagine in the scene I'm from, that's just a jacket. No one cares about that. Like that wasn't like a thing. But in the break scene, it was. If you imagine, I'd walk in a club and I would be it. That would be. I would be
The only black
representing
guy in there.
all ethnic. I represented all ethnic minorities in one in the break scene. So it was a lot. The scene was a lot different. Um, and I think they kind of wanted it to stay like that. If I'll be honest.
That's pretty unpleasant.
Yeah, I know, but the thing is, how can I put it? At that era, you had the MCs, and at those points, people was talking about garage clubs are getting shut down, and these issues with MCs. So I think their mentality was if you just keep it away from that scene as much as physically possible, i.e., take the color out of it, then you're more likely to be able to hire clubs. You're not going to get any issues. You're not going to get any problems. So I think that was their mentality. I don't think they was going in there actually thinking, let's keep it white. I think they were just keeping it as in, let's just keep the MCs out. And the way to keep the MCs out is to keep it as sort of one dimensional as possible.
Funnily enough, you mentioned that. You've made me think about a later bit of connection back to deep tech, right? If you ask what happened to deep tech, I mean, you can probably help me out with that. But like, I got the sense that at about a middle point of as deep tech got bigger, a bunch of the because there was UK Funky before, and UK Funky before wasn't that far behind deep tech. So I feel like there were some people who'd sort of seen it. Like UK Funky came out of like Kerry Chandler or some of these like other folk who like US folk making more like traditional house and stuff. I definitely remember with the deep tech, the conversations like, no, we can't start doing like MCs because we look what happened to knees and toes and all that stuff and all the MC tracks in UK Funky. We got to keep it instrumental and all that stuff and the fear of what and my memory of deep tech was like is that it was more multicultural than the way you described breaks. So it wasn't like
Uh,
a lot of these producers are saying this are black as well. They're just saying keep the MCs out because then it takes over. Do you remember any of that? Did you do you remember hearing anything like that, any of that stuff in deep tech?
I missed the UK funky scene. I knew of it, um, but I wasn't. I didn't really make any of that beat. So that sort of pattern. I didn't really do many tunes like that. So I got into the. I got it. I knew about the UK. It was becoming, say, like the deep way when that just started to become something new, and the funky started to fade out a little bit, and that started to come up. So I don't remember it. I really got much that I could comment about the transition of those two because I wasn't really in that scene.
Yeah, yeah, it's curious. I mean, I think I suppose yeah. I don't know what to say. I think I've always loved MCs, and I think one of the things I loved about Forward was there were people from all different bits of life, and I met people there
Yeah,
that I never met in other parts of life, and we had something in common for many years, and that was like actually a really special thing. So even though the music was good, that was just a bonus, like getting to meet people.
Yeah. I got people, and I'll probably talk to for the rest of my life that I met at Forward. You know, like that's that's what it was about. As it got older, you know, and became more popular. Yeah, you had ravers in there at that point, but at the beginning, they were just people who just wanted to hear the latest, greatest music by a specific DJ or a specific producer. And it was if you had just one of your tracks played in there, it was like an honor, you know, like now if I hear one of my tracks played in a club, I wouldn't think, oh, it's an honor to hear it. I'd be just more like, oh, right, okay, wicked, you did get that email then. But that, so it's like the mentality's changed. But back then, it was it was like it's almost like you were special if somebody played one of your tracks at Forward.
Yeah, I didn't get many plays, but when I did, I remember them very clearly.
But that's how, like I used to buzz off that. That was the reason I would travel for 3 hours or whatever from Sheffield to get there, listen to it, and drive back. That was how you would do that.
So look, I think the last few questions I want to ask is about the Keysound EP. So I'll Be Good, My Mind ticking me off. As I say, it was just one of those things that Dusk and I were just thinking about. It's like, hey, we were really curious about the deep tech scene. I put a Truce EP out, and it was really bassy and bleepy. And of the Keysound releases, I come back to tracks that have like a groove and that sort of bleepy bass line, and I'm just like, I wonder if Oris will be up for that. Can you tell me a little bit about making those tunes and what you thought about when you were doing them?
Yeah, the Ticking Me Off one, out of those, was weirdly probably my favorite one, because I've had that vocal for like forever, and I could never get it to fit in a track. I've tried numerous tracks, it just can't get it to fit, because he's almost singing it off. So I've scrapped it, and then I thought, for the final time, I'm going to try this vocal one more time. If it doesn't work out this time, then I'm not supposed to have this, right? Move on with your life, leave it alone. So I loaded it in last. So I started the track first, and I thought, let me try if it fits, if I can get it to just fit. And it fitted in the grooves, like almost by itself. So I think it must have realized that it was going to get deleted if it didn't fit this time, right? It fitted in the grooves. I was like, wow, okay. So yeah, then I had to do a bit of manipulating to get it to be like right. But I think that track there was probably my most favorite out of the EP. But that was probably my most fun out of the three to make. And then the other one that I really enjoyed making as well was I think it was the first one I sent to you, which has got like a weird groove.
I'll Be Good.
Thing. Yeah, I'll Be Good. Yeah. So I'm bad with names. When it comes to tracks. Just for reference, the first deep tech track I did was called All Around. I just remembered. So anyway, let me go back to this. So I'll Be Good. Again, I found a vocal, I really liked it. I was like, it's not going to fit in a 140 track, so let me see, I'll do a house track with it. Just got some new sounds for the studio, so I was like, let me see what I can do with these new sounds and the vocal that I just found. And sat there, and it kind of was quite fluid, that track. It wasn't one that it was a nightmare to me in any way. I probably got it wrapped up. It was probably done in a day and a half. That was fully finished. So I enjoyed making it. It's just the middle one, my mind took longer. So that took me about 3-4 days in time to do it. I think the longer it takes me to make a track, the less love I have for them, because I've heard it too many times. So it's a great track. Like, obviously, if you wasn't sat in the studio for 4 days with me, you'll like it. It's just, for me, it's just that track was the longest out of the three to do. Just because everything I tried, I weren't happy with this bit. this bit didn't sound right. Took this out, put it back in, changed the bass. Then it sounded like a different track, so I put the bass back in. Then I was like, was that exactly how I put it in? I can't remember. So it was just a lot of toing and froing with that one. But
what I think is cool about them is house music is mostly rooted around the kick, right? Kick and the hat, kick and the snare, like those. That's his main focus. And dubstep is, it was really quite a lot about the bass lines, fairly obviously, right? And there's loads of other styles, the different bounces, those things, but those tracks are doing, and then some of the deep tech stuff is like the interplay between the bass and the kick. It's just a really beautiful thing. It's like I think if you get just a really beautiful bleep or bass line or bassy bleep, like sometimes they can go down the frequencies, it's so perfect. And I think a lot of dance music is about. I don't do it very well, but I think dance music sometimes can be about finding a few really amazing elements, like not loads and loads and loads. Like you're not writing an orchestra for a film or whatever, and you need everything to be in key and there's 17 parts. But like some dance music, I think is like the really hard problem of finding a few perfect things. And some of those tracks, like especially "I'll Be Good," has really got that, like just down the way the riff, the way it just comes back to the last two notes of the bar. It's just hypnotic. Anyway, that's my enthusiasm for those tracks.
Yeah, that was. I did like that groove, and the groove in a way is like a one-off, because I've tried to do another one similar with a similar groove, and I can't get it to roll as nice as that. So that's probably going to be like a one-off sounding like that. Like a lot of tunes, sometimes I can make this sound a little bit like that sound, and you can hear that it's me done it. It's got that idiosyncrasy to it. But that one, "I'll Be Good," was I just sat there and it came to me like that. Like I felt it. It just fitted in there. I wish I had that feeling often where I could just do it like that.
Because it's dance music as well. I think is like about slightly breaking rules in interesting ways, not smashing the rules, otherwise you can't dance to it. But what I like about the Les, especially in "I'll Be Good," is like, is it breaking the rules? Because basically the bass line's doing on the 3/4. Like you think of like putting your foot down on the 1, up on the 2, down on the 3, up on the 4, right? But that groove just like, it ends in the 3/4, 3/4, and that's kind of a really happy like tweak of the rule. It's not like 1, 2, 3, 4, and it's not like 1, 2, in up and down. You've got this groove that ends in this hip. It just gets into my brain, or it's brilliant.
Yeah, it's a good tune. I like that tune. It was it came like the groove kind of just came to me. And again, I've tried doing a similar one to like after that, and it didn't work the same. So that was kind of, that idea is kind of like a one-off idea.